Welcome to the Heart-Led Business Show, where compassion meets commerce and leaders lead with love. Join your host, Tom Jacobs, as he delves into the insightful conversations with visionary business leaders who defy the status quo, putting humanity first and profit second. From heartfelt strategies to inspiring stories, this podcast is your compass in the world of conscious capitalism. So buckle up and let your heart guide your business journey.
Are you ready to take a catwalk with Catie Harris? She's a dedicated doyen, a nursing noblewoman, and the CEO of the vivacious venture Nursepreneurs. We'll dive into her tale, a compelling cocktail of critical care, clever entrepreneurial cuts, and courage. So tighten up your seatbelts for an enthralling journey from the ICU to CEO. Expect nothing less than Nursepreneurs' wisdom in high doses without the need for healthcare insurance. Right here on the Heart-Led Business Show. Catie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was the most amazing intro I've ever gotten.
You're very welcome. And thank you for being here. The first question I always like to ask, just to set the tone for the show, is what's your definition of a heart-led business?
So for me, a heart-led business would really, it really gets to the roots of why we went into nursing in the first place, which is to care about other people, to help them to achieve their goals and to educate them. And I think when nurses bring that into business and don't leave it behind, they end up doing extremely well. And it was something that I pulled over into my business as well. And part of it was because I was terrified of selling. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to focus on educating people. And that ends up being the right answer, right? That was my instinct, was to educate people and help them to make the choices, even if the choice isn't to work with me, right? Maybe the choice is to work with somebody else. And I think that goes a long way. So when your motivation is to really help people to make the best choices, sometimes it's you, sometimes it's not. To me, that is really a heart-led business.
Yeah, I love that. That's speaking my language as well. I always believe that in sales, we are problem solvers, and it's our duty and obligation to find a solution for the prospect, whether that is with us or with somebody else. So yeah, we're completely in sync on that. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about your business and what inspired you to start a heart-led business.
So I worked in the hospital for many years, and I loved the hospital. It was my family away from family. We were a very tight-knit group. I've known and watched my residents grow up from medical school through, I was going to say adulthood, but they were already adulthood, through attending is the word I was looking for, through attending. And it was a lot of fun. I had a great time with them. But the problem was for me is that I kept hitting a ceiling that I couldn't get past. So as a nurse, you can only do so much. And then it's just, well, I want to do more. So the next level is to become a nurse practitioner or get your master's and go to the next level. So that's what I did. And I worked with the neurosurgeons, and it took me about 5 years to really hit that ceiling again, where I was just, okay, I got it. I understand it. I do all the things with the surgeons. I go to the OR with them. I'm in the ICU. I do outpatient. I can do the whole gamut, but I can't bill and I can't keep moving forward. Like I was stuck, and it was really frustrating. And basically, because in the hospital setting, you always have to report in a teaching setting anyway to the intern. And the intern is a guy that just came out of med school that has no idea, or a gal for that matter, that has no idea what's going on, right? And I remember one morning coming in, or I don't know, I was reporting out to the intern, letting him know how my day went and stuff. And I told him some things that I did for a patient, and he says to me, well, that's not how we do things here. And I was like, you see that manual over there that says how we do things? I wrote that manual. That's what you're looking at, right? And that really set me off. And it was like a turning point for me, because I was like, I don't belong here anymore. I've outgrown this space, and they're not allowing me to grow anymore. And I'm the type of person that always has to be doing something new. I can't do repetitive things. Actually, teaching, not a great field for me either, because a new class comes in and it's like, I already said this. I said it 5 years ago. You weren't here. But so I have to constantly be growing. So I really looked out and said, what is it that I could do? And one of the first things I did was start talking to other nurses who were running businesses. And that was the foundation of my podcast, which is the Nursepreneurs podcast. And that really kickstarted the business, was talking to them about what they were doing, and really inspired me.
And so how did that translate into businesses that you now?
Right. So in talking to the nurses, and every person that I interviewed, I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. I had a Facebook group at the time too, just sharing the podcast. And the nurses would say the same thing. How do I do that? How do I do that? So I started to say, okay, well, this person has started this business. They're very successful. They make it look easy. Let's do this for the nurses, because that's what they want. So one of the first ones we started was how to become a legal nurse consultant. So step-by-step course on how to do that. One of our most popular courses for years has been IV hydration. So the nurses can relate to it. They put IVs in all the time. They hang IV, and they're like, well, I can do this. And it was something that they were very interested in. So I worked with one of the podcast guests to create a course to offer that to the nurses to help them get started in their business.
Wow. That's great. How long ago was that?
Well, I started Nursepreneurs in 2016. It took me a couple of years to figure out what the hell I was doing. So it didn't really take off until about 2019. And ironically, 2020 was the year that we got like bombarded with nurses that were like, get me out of the hospital.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So you're really, if I can paraphrase, teaching nurses how to get out of the clinical setting and start their own business so that they have the freedom and have their own trajectory of where they want to take things. And so that you took that ceiling that you were running into, you broke through it, and now you're showing others to how to break through that ceiling as well. Did I get that?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously not everybody wants to break through the ceiling. Some people are perfectly happy there, and that's great. But for those that do, instead of leaving the profession, which is what happens, people get so frustrated and they go, I don't know, become a barista at Starbucks. And that has happened. But I'm like, you have 20 years of experience, right? You can't just leave the profession. There's so much that you can do, and it doesn't have to be an IV hydration clinic. There's a million things that you could apply to the business realm and really help people at scale.
Yeah. What was legal nurse? So what was that?
So legal nurse consulting, basically we work with lawyers who are working on malpractice or suits or healthcare related suits, because the lawyers don't understand medical speak, and they'll get these charts and I've done it. And I literally this was like 10 years ago, but they sent me like 15 massive boxes of documentation. And I'm like, holy crap, I hate this job. And you have to go through it and paraphrase everything for the lawyer and explain whether this was a deviation from standard of care. So nurses that are very detailed oriented, and there's a lot of them, this is perfect. It's an at-home job. The hard part is obviously getting in with the lawyers and positioning yourself as a professional who can get the job done, basically.
And an expert in the field. Yeah.
And an expert.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And it's such a business. It continues to surprise me over and over again, the more I talk to people, and how many different niche type businesses there are out there. I think it's really up to anybody's imagination on what type of business that they can ultimately go into. And then it's finding what that problem is and then solving that problem for.
Yeah, one of the early podcast episodes that I did, and I was really blown away by this woman, but she had a placenta encapsulation business. And I was like, I don't know what you're saying. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. So basically, she goes and works with mothers who are about to give birth. And when they do give birth, she takes the placenta and she turns it into pills so that they can take those pills. And there's a lot of science behind ingesting the placenta after birth and the health benefits that are related with it. But I was like, who thought of this? Like, it's crazy. But she was doing really well. And apparently there's a whole like world of placenta encapsulation people, and it gets popularized by celebrities who do it. And they've been doing it in China for centuries.
This is fascinating. It reminds me of a TV show where they actually like sauteed the placenta.
That's getting a bit much. The pill I can handle. I don't know if I could take a chomp out of it.
That's interesting. That's cool. So let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about business side and how you've been able to balance being a heart-led business and really thinking about people first, but putting people before profits and actually making a profit, and how that's evolved from you?
Yeah, that's so the first course that I put together, it was a basic 6-module how to start your business type of course. And it literally took me 2 years to put the website together, put a webinar together, and finally run out of things to do. So it was just, look, you either put the webinar on or move on to something else, right? Like it's just, we're not going anywhere anymore. So I launched the webinar and Facebook ads, have all this stuff. And I had like 300 people sign up for it.
Oh,
It was
wow.
really great. Maybe 50 people showed up and 5 people bought the program. It was like a $4.99 program. And one, I was devastated because I thought that was terrible because everybody else was doing 6-figure webinar launches and I made, or so I thought. And here I made a couple $1,000s. But
On your first webinar.
my first webinar, and later to find out that if I had scaled that, it would have been great. But my first instinct after those people bought was sheer terror. And all I wanted to do was give them their money back and just be like, oh, I'll just do it for free. And it was part of that imposter syndrome and the fear of taking people's money and was I good enough? So it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but the heart-led aspect of that was I felt like I should do it for free for them. And then going through more coaching and whatnot, getting out of that mindset and showing that the only way that I could help people is if they did pay me for that expertise. Like I could have just done that and then stopped, but then I wouldn't have Nursepreneurs, right? Like it's not a hobby that you want to get into for 10 years. It is something that needs to support you and your family. And it's also, you do a disservice to people when you give them things for free because now they no longer value it nearly as much as if they paid for it. So you have to value what you're giving to that person in exchange for money. And it's just something that you have to wrap your mind around.
What was that mental shift like for you? Like, how long did it take? Like, what advice you got and all that good stuff?
Definitely hard. And I have to always remind myself that even if I'm pushing a big package on them, it's because I know it's going to help them. And you really have to believe in what you're offering in order to do that, right? I don't want to push big packages on people and just hope and pray that maybe it works. I really want to know that what we're offering, that I can stand behind and be proud. And then it becomes, and I've been on the reverse end of that where somebody's selling me. I had one guy who was selling me a big package and I was like, and he pushed and I finally gave in and I was like, okay, fine. And it turned out to be one of the best programs that I had gone through. And of course I've been burnt the other way, but they were so compelling and they were so proud of what they were doing that he pushed really hard and it was for my benefit.
Did it feel like it was a really big push or how did that?
Every objection I came up with, he was like, okay, but what are you going to do? You spent an hour on the phone with me. You need marketing. This has to get done. If you hang up and walk away from this, what is your plan? And I'm like, I don't have a plan. My plan is to hope and pray.
Oh, no, that's good. And did it feel like you were being pushed?
It felt like I was being pushed, but it wasn't an icky push. It wasn't, because it really came across that he believed in what his team was doing and just case study after case study and call this person. Here's this guy's website. Like they had they could back up a lot of it. So,
and it is probably coming from his heart as well, that he really knew that he could help you out and felt like you needed the help.
Right. And that came through.
Oh,
that came
good.
through.
That's awesome. So speaking of transitions, how was the transition going from the hospital setting into working for yourself? Because I know a lot of listeners out there are entrepreneurs. So they want to do a business, but are afraid to cut the ties with the 9-to-5.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for us, it's a 7 to 7. And the problem with nurses is that they like to take on extra jobs, but they never let go of any jobs. So I had that problem too. I always had at least 5 jobs at any given time. Well, I could spend the other 4 days working on a business. However, it never works out that way because they have 4 or 5 jobs. They end up working 5 12-hour shifts a week and they're exhausted, right? And then they're like, oh, I'm going to do my business on the weekends. And it's just, yeah, something's got to go. This is not going to work out. And so I've had a lot of conversations with nurses like that. But it's definitely something that they can start on the side, start small, but they're eventually going to come to a point, and I had this with one of my students where she was working as an OR manager. And that's a tough job because on paper it's 40 hours a week, but in reality it's like 60 hours a week, and it overflows into the weekends and stuff. And she had started an IV hydration business, and it started out with like on Thursday nights from, I don't know, 4 to 8, she was doing IV hydration at a gym, and that was a side gig, but they wanted her more. But the OR wasn't allowing it. So she had to decide what to do. Like if she wanted to expand the business, she had to cut back on the hours at the hospital. So she ended up going per diem, and it hurt. It really hurt for a while because it was a financial drop. It was a loss of predictable income, but it's what catapulted her into, now she's got multiple clinics and is doing extremely well. It's a leap of faith in yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And so how was that for you personally, doing the transition?
The transition, yeah, it's a huge leap of faith. And it took a long time because a lot of the stuff with Nursepreneurs, I have a team for, but I left the hospital, I would say 2020 was the last. So during COVID, I went into the OR and I'm like, I'm done. I can't. It felt like I couldn't really be successful until I left that job, because it felt like if I was holding on to that hospital job, that somehow I wasn't successful at Nursepreneurs, right? So it was a big deal to let that go. And I did, and it worked out in my favor, but it was terrifying. And it was also one of those things where you're like, oh my God, I need to cancel every subscription that I have now and buckle down, and we'll eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But fortunately that didn't come to pass.
I think it's that fortitude as well, just knowing that there isn't a safety net and you need to make it happen and you're confident in your abilities. I think that propels people so much more than they realize it does.
Yeah. And over the years too, I always lived up or down to my income, right? So when income's good, we're going on nice vacations, we're doing this and that, and I'm buying crap on Amazon that I don't need and furniture. And when the income's down, you don't buy that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what do you like most about running your business?
I started a whole peptide program, and I really dove into that field like full throttle, and really sharing that with our nurses, and really looking forward to the wellness industry exploding in regenerative medicine. So bringing those aspects into what we're doing at Nursepreneurs and helping pull the nurses along that pathway, is so that they're offering like the newest, latest, greatest medical technology that's really helping people. So, and just making sure that they know about it, they're aware of what's going on in the industry and how they can incorporate it into their already existing businesses, or as a side hustle. They can certainly do one service line and do it mobile for a while.
Oh, nice. That's cool. And on the flip side of that, what is the biggest challenge that in your business that you don't particularly like to?
Oh, well, I hate, because I'm a visionary type personality, I don't like detail. I don't like being bogged down with it. The operations, because we do have a team, and it makes me crazy because, to me, it's like, I'll give you an outcome and just get it done. And not everybody operates that way. They want step-by-step instructions, or it's got to be written down in an SOP somewhere. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you should know what I'm thinking. Just read my mind. What's the problem? So, but that's how I operate. I can't tolerate people micromanaging me or saying you have to do it this way. It's like, what is the outcome? And then leave me alone, and I'll come back with the outcome done. And don't worry about how I got done. I'll deal with that. But really realizing that a lot of people don't operate that way.
Definitely, as a visionary and a CEO of a company where you're setting kind of the strategy and the bigger picture, it's hard to flip to that detail levels. So do you have somebody on your team that complements what you do?
I do. Oh, yeah. And she's amazing. So she manages we have a lot of freelancers or contract workers. And to me, that's like the bane of my existence, is chasing people around to make sure that they've done what they're supposed to do when they said they would do it, at the cost that they said they would do it, and then holding them accountable. So she does that. That was like one of my first big hires. Please get this off my plate.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did it feel once she took over and you had that time back?
It's amazing, because now I can be like, well, what, can you just fix this? Yeah, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. I'm like, oh, thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have somebody like that on my team as well, and it's so invaluable to have.
Yeah, you got to find a good one.
Well, just like anything, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find some.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
yeah. So what type of advice would you give to somebody that is wanting to start a business or expand their heart-led business and leave a corporate job?
Yeah, I always tell my nurses that courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. And if they have found a problem that needs to be solved, and there's a lot of problems out there, that to really dig into it. So what is it? What is the problem? And from a heart-led business standpoint, really diving into from the client's perspective or the potential client's perspective, what it means to them, what it would mean if it didn't exist, really just basic business research, right? Interviewing people, finding out what their desires are, what their concerns are, and what questions they have about it, and then really focus on providing a solution that addresses those elements of the question, of the
Yeah.
problem.
Oh, that's great advice, because I think a lot of people go into business solving their own problem, which is, I want to get rid of my 9 to 5 or 7 to 7. And that isn't solving somebody else's problem. It's solving an internal problem.
Mhm.
And then the business isn't successful because they don't know what the consumer ultimately wants.
Right. Because when you do start a business, you're no longer the client, right? You can't see from the client's perspective. So you really have to, and I made that mistake early on because I'm like, oh, I know what nurses want. They want this. But that's where the value of the Facebook group came in, because while I was pushing basic business education, they were like, no, we want step-by-step, like, how do I set up this IV hydration business? And I'm like, okay, fine. So that's when I partnered with the IV hydration coach to bring that. And that really exploded the business because I actually listened to what they were saying. And so that Facebook group is invaluable information for us. They talk about what they want all the time in there. And it's so helpful.
Great. And as an innovator yourself, like, that's like, yes, that's gold, right? What your next
Yeah.
10 projects are.
Exactly.
Well, Caitie, this has been just fascinating to hear your story, hear the story of some of your students as well. How can people learn more about Nursepreneurs and things that you're doing?
Well, they can go to nursepreneurs.com, which is our website. We have lots of free information on our website. We offer courses, workshops, and marketing platform solutions. So they can go there. If they get on our email list, we do a weekly webinar that focuses on a different service line or business line or just marketing in general. And of course, we have our podcast, the Nursepreneurs podcast, which focuses on nurses in business and marketing techniques.
Awesome. Well, that's great. We will link all that up into the show notes as well, so that it makes it easy for the listeners or viewers to check that all out. So, Caitie, thank you so
Awesome.
much for being on the show today and sharing your wisdom. I certainly appreciate it. I know our listeners appreciate it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks
No
for having me.
worries. And thank you, listeners, for watching or listening to the show today, depending on what platform you're on. And make sure you're checking out everything that Catie's doing. And like I said, we're going to put that all in the show notes as well. And if you could do me a solid favor, if you found this episode helpful, if you could share it with a friend or a colleague that could use some of the advice that Caitie has shared today. And until next time, lead with your heart.
You've been listening to the Heart-Led Business Show, hosted by Tom Jacobs. Join us next time for another inspiring journey into the heart of business.